David, welcome to the very first live production episode of Data Binge Podcast. How you doing?
Doing great, Derek. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, this is super exciting. I think we've been talking about this for a little while here. And how about we start off the discussion with a quick positive thing that you are thinking about or is happening to you in this wake of this crazy crisis that we're in, and I'll get started. Not to put you in an odd spot, but feeling very positive that my wife and I are still working and working probably too much. And we finally realized that it's time for her to step away from work a little bit and go part-time, because we're finally realizing that we don't spend enough time with our kids. And now that they're home all the time, we want to watch them grow up a little bit more. So we're super thankful for that. So that's my positive thing. Why don't you go for it?
Yeah, that's awesome, by the way, because I think this weird pandemic is going to cause us all to reflect on how we live and operate and probably make some changes. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So like you, I have two, a bit older. And what's been really interesting, I think, positive from a family perspective is the decomplication of life a little bit. I mean, obviously, it's a very complicated experience as we can't go out. But in some ways, it's forced us to simplify our lives, not overschedule, not kind of run from thing to thing, but like Saturday morning, Sunday mornings, getting back to making pancakes, playing chess with the kids, spending quality time, which, to be honest with you, you're running from soccer game to baseball game, you miss some of that. So that's been one positive from a familial perspective for sure.
I love that. And so I'll kick off kind of why we're on the call today, or the discussion today, and how we know each other. So last year, I think February or so, I heard that LinkedIn Live was releasing its beta platform, LinkedIn Live. I applied for it, got through into the beta process, tried a couple different streaming applications. So in order to stream live, you have to kind of be vetted through the application process, and then you have to choose some kind of a third-party software vendor to create this video and then deploy it through these different live players, if you will.
Yep.
Did that, use Socialive platform. We're actually using that today. And you reached out and said, "Hey, Derek, how can we help you?" You're the only person that reached out of all these different solutions I used. And then you kind of brought to bear this entire team that has been helping me go live in the past year so far. It's been absolutely wonderful. I feel like a part of the family, the Socialive family. And you guys have done so much to help me create some really great content, and just looking forward to just diving into this discussion. So what do you do at Socialive, and what is Socialive?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for being a partner as well. I remember when you did sign up, and immediately said, let's start talking to this guy, and we're excited to keep working with you. Socialive, I'm the founder and CEO of the company. Socialive is a complete enterprise video platform. So our foundation, our background is in live video, but we're really like an end-to-end enterprise video platform. So we help, large scale enterprise customers really solidify and simplify how they capture, create, and distribute video across the enterprise. And that's for, certainly external communications and marketing like we're doing here, but also for internal communications, learning and development, and recruitment marketing as well.
And so what is, okay, right now we have this massive influx of everything is going video, and even the title of the discussion today is, video is the new executive messaging. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between a virtual meeting and what you guys are doing? So you have these like the Zooms and the Teams and those types of solutions, and what you guys are doing, and what have you been up to the last 3 to 4 weeks? It's got to be crazy.
Yeah, no, I'll answer the latter question first, and we'll circle back to, virtual conferencing versus, scalable video content creation. So for us, the business has actually exploded in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And, I'm obviously just grateful to be on this side of it, because it's a really dicey economy out there. Yeah. And we've added about 25 or 30 new customers in just the last 3 weeks alone. And we're also seeing a lot of expansion in how our existing customers are using the platform, just given the nature of having a remote workforce and executives having a need to create quick video to communicate and engage with employees and with, even corporate affairs. So, but what's really interesting is some of the challenges that I think we're seeing is helping folks understand can in the changing world, what the difference is between a virtual meeting software, Zoom being, I think, one of the leaders right now in the market, but also Microsoft Teams has a great platform, and I've actually spent a lot of time on that. But understanding kind of the difference between like what's great for a meeting, virtual meeting, versus I need to create more of a dynamic presentation. I need to deliver a live video experiences that is engaging and immersive, and even a kind of a gated webinar. So I think we're learning right now that video content creation and live streaming, they're different than a virtual meeting. There's kind of a place where you can take Zoom or Microsoft Teams to from a conferencing perspective, but then from an executive presentation and messaging perspective, or just video storytelling perspective, it doesn't quite go to that level. And that's where we really occupy, is that scalable video content creation and storytelling side of the market.
And before I ask you how this entire solution started to form and what your thoughts are about the industry, I just have to ask you a quick question. What does the future of electronic dance music mean to you when I say that?
Oh my God, yeah. So I guess you have read a little bit about the history of Socialive. So like many startups, we were not Socialive out of the gates. We essentially pivoted and morphed into Socialive over the course of a fairly long journey. Sometime we'll have a beer and talk more about it. But before we were Socialive, we were Mixify, a platform for electronic music artists to stream, both virtually, as well as we were connecting DJs into venues across the world. So we had like Steve Aoki streaming live from LA into Vietnam in a two-way experience with a lot of latency, by the way, back then. But it's interesting. In the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of electronic music and other types of musical artists come back to Socialive, not knowing that we were formerly Mixify, sometimes saying we miss Mixify, we're looking to stream. So it's kind of full circle. I mean, we're obviously in the enterprise space now, but the idea that, our ideas of how, streaming and connectivity could happen are coming full circle as we speak right now.
And so when we're talking about a lot of really fun stuff, and certainly we're both creators, and I'm using your platform to create video and deploy video, produce it. You've been in this industry for longer than I even knew existed, really. Since 2009 with Mixify. How did you get into this thing? And just kind of looking at your LinkedIn profile and some of the history of your career, you have a JD law degree from Harvard. So what does that have to do with all of this digital creation, and how did you get started? Why were you interested in this entire thing, and how does that meet up to what you're doing today?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I mean, it starts first of all with, I've always had kind of a creative and entrepreneurial bend, like even going back to, high school, college days. A lot of that was actually initially oriented more around social enterprise. Like when I was in college, I started a nonprofit organization with a good friend called School Children of the World. And we produced educational videos on school children from Zimbabwe and Malaysia to help kids in the US learn about their peers, but through the personal narrative. So it's interesting, even going back to college, there was this element of how to use video, how to use storytelling to make things more real, more concrete, to help kids in the US kind of break down the barriers of geography, to say, hey, these kids in Zimbabwe, they're not so different from me, and the ways they are different from me are actually wonderful to learn about and embrace. So that existed in me for a long time. I also had kind of this interest on the analytical side, which ultimately led me to law school. And, coming out of law school, I spent a few years at McKinsey Consulting, which is, a place for highly analytical business training, and then moved over to a company called Scholastic, which, is the publisher of Clifford the Big Red Dog and Scholastic Book Fairs, book clubs, and essentially became a corporate entrepreneur within that company within about a year. And that's where I really started to get the bug to do my own thing. And, I actually had an idea that kind of emanated from something I built within Scholastic, which was an online music creation platform for kids. And I can't, on this conversation today, connect all the dots, but it all has led to what we are today, Socialive.
And that's just such a cool career map. And I think a lot of people who are getting into the startup world really care about connecting the dots and what that means. And I'd love to dive into education maybe at the tail end of the call.
Sure.
But there's a lot of content that you've created or talked about, or talks you've been on, or things that you've shared where you talk about this authentic self and what that means. And just when I think of authentic, and I just went and just looked it up in the dictionary, and it's of undisputed origin, right? And everyone's talking about this authentic thing, but are they truly authentic? What is your definition of that, and how are you thinking that video is evolving into this space in the enterprise and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really fascinated with right now is, COVID and kind of the challenges of COVID have, I think, forced the enterprise to embrace authenticity somewhat by default, right? Like in this type of moment, you can't bring out a large scale video production crew, kind of craft the perfect looking message over, really produce this perfectly, take weeks to push it out. The world's shifting, right? So one, we got to be able to produce faster. Two, it's got to look good. It's got to be on brand, but production doesn't trump the story or the message you're trying to tell, right? And thirdly, speed, right? You got to get this content out there. Things are moving too quickly to have kind of back and forth and weeks go by. It's just accelerating. And so I think there's this change in the market, which has really been accelerated by social media in general, and now even more facilitated, or I should say accelerated by Corona, which is, look, content's ephemeral. Like your message is, you got to hit hard, and you got to hit quick. And I think that just in a world of like high production, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily work all the time. And so it's not that you can't be on brand or produce something that looks great. It's just that the story and the message is ultimately what wins.
And just looking at some statistics all up, when you think about video, and just kind of captured a couple little key facts here. Cisco projects global internet traffic to be consumed by video 82% by 2021. Mm-hmm. Using the word video in an email subject increases click-through rate from 19% to 65%. So people are thinking about video. Mm-hmm. 85% of videos on Facebook are watched without sound. So you have those legacy types of statistics. 75% of business executives actually watch online videos every week. And then, of course, I'm a little biased. I'm on the Microsoft team. But you look at today, Microsoft Teams, you're twice as likely in the last month to turn on video when you're on a conference call. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those daily conference minutes are now up to 2.7 billion minutes a day. Just massive growth. So why, as folks start to look at video, as folks start to really focus on their video strategy, I know Socialive, you mentioned that there's a live component, there's an internal comms component. What are all the different pieces that you're thinking about as you start to talk to some of these business leaders about the platform?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so first and foremost, one of the features that we really continue to build out, which we think is critical, is what we call like democratized capture of video across the enterprise. So one of the big challenges within a lot of enterprise organizations is, how do I get video in from folks in different locations? I mean, and now we're seeing this more than ever. I can't send out a video crew to the CEO's home even today because of the current situation. So how do I get this video sourced from the field in a way that is so dead simple for that, say, C-level executive or that business influencer or that subject matter expert? So we have a feature within Socialive that's on our mobile app. It's called Record a Video. It is dead simple, but it's actually very powerful. It allows you to record a video straight from the phone, connects into a centralized library, video library that's accessible by the admins of that team. From there, they get it within minutes. The nice thing is there's no storage on the phone, no need for disparate, kind of storage mechanisms to get it there. So you don't have to use, OneDrive in this case, or Google Drive, or Dropbox. It's back in the library. The nice thing is from there, an admin with no video experience, generally speaking, can clip that up. They can bring it into the Socialive studio to add some polish, some branding, some calls to action, whatever it might be, and publish it out. You take the end-to-end video capture, creation, and distribution experience from hours or days or weeks to literally can be minutes. And that is one thing that I'm really, really excited about. Additionally, we're really kind of continuing to build out some of the live capabilities within Socialive, especially thinking about like how to create more like gated webinar experiences. And I think we'll see some evolution on LinkedIn in terms of what they offer there, but also third-party platforms. How do you create kind of that gated branded experience behind a wall?
And in those discussions, this is super interesting. I love how you're just touching upon what's going on right now with this logistics nightmare of trying to get a film crew out. I mean, you're in your home. You don't have a film crew with you right now.
Yeah.
what do these discussions look like, David, that you're just having? I mean, you guys are unbelievably busy. I'm seeing emails coming over from you guys at like 9 p.m. at night, 6 a.m. in the morning. Like your whole team is just full throttling.
Yeah.
Can you describe what that outreach looks like to you from some kind of a leadership perspective, and then what your follow through is, what kind of questions you're asking, like what does that journey look like, that customer journey?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time in the market for us. I mean, it's a sad time overall in the market for a whole slew of reasons, because we certainly have customers whose businesses are massively affected. But for us, we are in a really unique position, I think, to be able to help our customers in a way that I think when they see Socialive, they're like, oh, I didn't even know something like this existed. It actually unlocks creativity and innovation because of the agility in terms of the workflows and the options they have here. So, what's happening is, first and foremost, like, I think a lot of our business right now is very much inbound driven, right? So I think over the last 2 years, we've started to build our profile in the marketplace. We've certainly gotten into some great organizations that we feel really fortunate that have taken us on as customers. So one, being part of, being within those organizations and being through procurement alone makes us a viable option for companies to move quickly to adopt us. But also, like, we've proven ourselves within those organizations. But what we're seeing a lot of is, it's interesting. It's across industries. I mean, we're getting inbound inquiries across probably about 25 different industries right now. Some of the ones that have been most interesting is, first of all, media and entertainment. Media and entertainment has historically not been a market that we've gone after, because they tend to have a lot of installed hardware, kind of more traditional video production approaches. Well, they're in a bind right now because they can't do it the way they've done it before, because everyone's remote. We've been working with a number of organizations, including Viacom, on being able to really kind of enable multiple guests to join in an experience, not actually to broadcast it live necessarily, but to essentially capture that content, take out the isolated feeds, and then put it through their post-production flow. So what's that really helping is this ability to get the key content from celebrities and other key kind of content experts for their programming, and still be able to push out both linear programming as well as social programming. So that's more in kind of the media and entertainment space. But in the executive world, we're definitely seeing a lot of inbound interest right now for corporate comms and executive comms. And I say on executive comms, it's really about C-level messaging, particularly to the employee base. Like, how do we get, the C-level execs in front of the employee base to create a sense of business continuity, keep the engagement going? And again, I think what we're finding is it's got to be dead simple for the C-level execs. Like, the idea is that they just have to be able to join, click a button, and be recording video or joining live. And someone on their team can be handling things virtually on the back end. And we kind of designed the platform with that in mind.
And what's the, like, is there friction? I mean, I'm just thinking about folks who are dialing in on a day-to-day business, kind of business calls, virtual calls, meetings, and they just don't feel comfortable engaging on video. Folks are engaging video twice as much as they used to, but where's the friction that you're seeing just generally as a culture, as a business culture, if you're not talking to like the Snapchats of the world and these very fast moving kind of young enterprises? What is the biggest friction point, and what is your advice as you're seeing this as an advisor to some of these executives in terms of how they should start just enabling themselves to be more digital?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm not seeing a whole lot of friction at the enterprise, like, kind of C-level perspective. In fact, I think I've been amazed by what I'm like the types of companies that are asking for our support, and kind of the way they're thinking about this. It's like, it's spot on. So I think that the business need is there, and I think the organizations are generally stepping up to the challenge. What I think needs to change in the market is actually procurement, to be honest with you. Like, the reality is legal and procurement naturally have a role, and their role is to mitigate risk. But in a world that's moving really, really fast, that risk mitigation, and reminder, I'm a lawyer by training, so I can appreciate this side of it, but the risk mitigation with the need to accelerate and get out in front of it, there's a bit of a clash there. Now, organizations are figuring out a way to leverage agencies and other kind of groups to run this through. In our case, run Socialive through, or if we're already in procurement, it's a different story. But I think that's one of the areas that I think coming out of this, there's going to be like a real look at, like, hey, we're not able to get things up and running because we typically have a 6 to 12 month procurement process. Like the world moves too fast for that. On the
Yeah.
flip side, you need to be sensitive to security. I mean, we know what's been happening with Zoom recently, and obviously starting to address some of that. But there is a reality around security and risk. But we got to figure out a balance within the enterprise of how you can move fast enough while maintaining security.
It's you're touching on some really interesting points, and Brad Smith, he's the president at Microsoft. He wrote a book called I think Weapons and Tools and Weapons, one of the two. It just talks about AI and security and privacy, and we're just seeing this with our own government system.
Right.
How can you be nimble enough to look at the market and respond to what's going on in the world? And I think a lot of large organizations are probably going to have a tough time with that, and especially institutional organizations like state and local government. When you think about a message that you want to leave for folks that are struggling with how they should approach this, especially right now, like what does that message look like, just from your experience as a leader, as a founder and a CEO of Socialive? Like, what does that look like when people are they don't know what to do, which is certainly the issue with a lot of different businesses here?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you just got to start moving. Like, I think don't let paralysis be the obstacle. You gotta commit to video and to the messaging. Again, I think simplicity is key. Like, what we always work with our customers on is, let's not design the grandest idea. Let's focus on what our objective is in terms of what is the message objective, what is the business objective, what's the fastest, easiest, least friction-filled way to get there. And that's repeatable, right? And so I think sometimes we get focused on kind of bells and whistles, when at the end of the day, we got to find the fastest way to get the messaging out, to engage. And the other thing is, like, content is not a one-time thing. Like, we're doing this live video right now, right? A certain number of people will see it. Some people will engage with it, great. But it's content. So how do we take this 45 or 60-minute piece of content we have? How do we take that and turn that into multiple pieces of messaging that we can repurpose? So that's another thing we're really pushing on. The whole idea of live video is not an island. It's not a one-time thing. It's a long-form content. It's your big rock content that you can repurpose in an ongoing way. So you got to do that.
And how much of the discussion is that consult? So you're starting to go into this advisory kind of role, and you're talking about, look, guys, like, or gals, certainly, this is how you should approach. This is what you should be doing. You're talking about authentic self. You're talking about internal comms. What's going on at the times today. When it comes to guidance, and now that I'm sure you're having these discussions with marketing, like, what are those groups that you're having those discussions with? Are they more folks like me from the get-go who are interested in this thing? Is it marketing teams? And then what level of feedback are you giving them in terms of their strategy moving forward? Or do they just have their own strategy already?
Yeah, so I'd say in most cases, they have like a general sense of what they need to do, maybe. They also have far more constrained timelines than they've ever had before. I mean, I can't tell you the number of folks who are coming in saying, hey, we need to do this in 3 days or 4 days. So we're well positioned to help these teams for a few reasons. One, the platform is really, really easy to onboard folks on. It's generally intuitive. But two, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years and being in this space, we've just become kind of de facto experts on, scalable video content creation, even metrics around the marketing side, like how to think about, building the funnel versus, top of the funnel engagement and eyeball, kind of aggregation. I mean, even for example, things like we're simulcasting on my page and your page. These are things we figured out that we build into a playbook, right? And so, a big part of what we're bringing to the folks we work with isn't just, here's some technology that's really good. In fact, we don't even start with the technology. We start with, what's your objectives? What's the use case? How do we design around those business objectives and use case in the simplest, most repeatable way? Okay, here's how we apply the technology for that. Okay, then let's build the next use cases, because it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one trick pony, but it's like get you out of the gates is something really successful. And then we got playbooks for those things. So our customer success team, as you've seen into it, we'll kind of partner up with these companies, because we're not just looking at this as what's your video strategy, what's your video content. We're like, how do we create cultural transformation at your organization? And that's kind of C-level thinking. And look, we don't care if you're a social media manager or a CEO, like, we're going to help bring that type of thinking to the table in terms of how we transform the culture little by little with this type of video content.
And Cultural transformation, and those are just words I'm so familiar with because those are the types of discussions I'm having day to day in my day job at Microsoft, just constantly talking about. And for us, it's more about innovation. For you, it's probably more communication and those types of things. When it comes to gaps that you see in the marketplace, not just for you as a business, but in terms of the need that you see or the need that you think is going to be filled, whether it be by a Socialive or a competing platform or whatever, like what does that gap analysis look like? Is that high? Are those things that are just evolving from a day to day? Like, 3 months ago, we didn't know that Zoom would be talked about every 60 seconds. And now it is like, have you thought about some trends and things that are super interesting that you think you're going to have to try to capture soon?
Yeah, I mean, look, interestingly, I would say broadly speaking, our product roadmap hasn't changed all that much, which I think suggests that what we've been building against was already primed for this moment, is even more primed for the post-pandemic moment as well. But I'll kind of break it into like different phases. So there's a lot. Look, I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg in the world that we live in. Like Zoom and virtual conferencing, that's a very well-established, relatively old category from a video perspective. And Zoom, in many regards, has just done it better than a lot of existing folks. But there's still, again, it's built on a different kind of technology and a different vision of content or video. It's not actually content creation, it's meetings, right? So where we live, we think we're still at the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, Gartner hasn't even created a magic quadrant on our space because it's emerging. They don't probably even know it exists. Yeah. We're here to say it does exist, but right now I think we're kind of, it's not really clear like how it would be organized. But to start, we think the biggest need right now is on enterprise scale and simplicity, right? So the biggest challenge we are solving is around video content creation for the enterprise, right? Which historically has gone through like centralized teams and needs to kind of be more democratized. You need to allow, retail associates at Walmart to contribute content. You need C-level executives to be able to join from a mobile phone on the go. You need to make this just a lot easier. So we're solving that, and there's a lot of things we want to continue to build in our platform there. But bigger picture, look, we see a gaping hole, quite frankly, in the webinar space. Folks are, I won't name the platforms, but folks are using pre-existing solutions that they're not thrilled with. And there's a way to do this more modern, more dynamic, more immersive. And we're putting together some partnerships there that I think will allow us to more sooner rather than later kind of go after the webinar space in a clearer way and kind of own that gated or ungated webinar side of the equation or play a big part in that. Another area we're really looking at is live video commerce. It's not our most immediate priority, even though I think there is a huge opportunity there. But, look, we have a Shopify app. We have Shopify merchants who are starting to do live video on their Shopify store. It's not kind of where we ultimately expect it to go in terms of it being fully interactive and shoppable. But we see, just like we've seen in China, that's coming, right? It's coming. And I don't think the merchants want to cede that entirely to Facebook and Instagram. I think they want to have a little bit of control over that. So we're looking to play in that space as well. That's an area. And another area we're really starting to think about is the future of digital marketplaces. So ultimately, video is what's going to power, Airbnb, TripAdvisor, and all these other kind of real estate like Trulia and Zillow. We know that's going to happen. And I think we're probably a year or so ahead, maybe, or two from where they might envision it. But we want to be ready to kind of become the powering platform for marketplaces so that you can see video on the fly when you're looking for real estate or thinking about buying a new car. And you can have some kind of lead gen transactional opportunity right there in those platforms.
You're touching upon all the sweet spots where being someone, and I've kind of had these discussions and I'm super passionate on the topic. That's why I wanted to get on this discussion with you. I think the things that you're thinking about and solving for are just absolutely incredible. And from a gap perspective, the way that I'm seeing things and just being on a global sales force, for instance, for Microsoft, and I don't see too many of my peers creating this type of content. Usually it comes out of marketing or our leadership team that's creating this type of internal comms. I think Microsoft has done a great job at internal comms and those types of things because we own a lot of those different platforms. We're a tech company that's the way it's going to go. When you think about like, I think you mentioned this when we were talking a couple weeks ago, this guerrilla warfare aspect of what does it mean for a sales team to start having some thoughts being thought leaders, creating content, and just a piece of what that looks like for folks that don't understand this platform. You log in, you invite folks to come in, you're creating this video, whether it be live or an on-demand version of that capture, and then you're able to deploy that video across into your B2B space, into your B2C space with YouTube, which this is being deployed to, into Facebook. So now you're taking this opportunity for this person who's having real conversations with customers on a day-to-day basis to just start talking about some of the things that they're prospecting on, things that they specifically focus on, their perspective, whether it be technology, whatever, and they're deploying that at scale. And organically, that can touch more people than a marketing campaign could. When you think about sales, 100%. And so many of these businesses are like, how can we increase revenue? Yeah. Like, what are our revenue opportunities? Like, I'd love for you to talk about, and let's have some fun with this. Small company, maybe mid-size, let's say 5,000 employees or less. Just barely coming into the enterprise. Like, they're probably not doing video. What does that journey look like? Like, when you hear sales and revenue increasing and having the sales force kind of go and digitize and create content, what goes through your brain?
Well, I think you first got to ask, why is it not happening to start? Like, why is it not happening in the real estate space? Why is it not happening for auto dealerships? Why is it not happening for sales organizations? Well, the reality is because people think it's hard, and historically it's been really freaking hard. Like, it's really damn hard, but it shouldn't be that hard. Look, we have plenty of parallels in other industries of how software has made something historically complex a lot easier. We're now in that part of the world with video, and hopefully Socialive's kind of, leading the way a little bit there. But like, it starts with, you got to make it easy. The second thing is you got to make it known. So, enterprises, have to be able to kind of make this stuff available. So they have to be open to that innovation. But look, if you're a sales organization right now, I can't tell you how important social selling via video is. And I don't mean it could be thought leadership. It could be just getting your message out. But in the year or so since I've been doing video on LinkedIn, 5% to 10% of revenue that we booked from large enterprise customers has come through folks that, have seen some of the content I've produced, that are people, yes, probably in most cases I had relationships with them. Maybe I went to law school with them, but I haven't talked to them in 15 or 20 years, right?
Yep.
Seeing the video, getting back in touch, all of a sudden a conversation is happening with C-level executives at these organizations. I mean, and it's just been putting it out there, right? So nowadays, more than ever, the channels are there. The distribution that's the thing, is the distribution is not a problem. There is distribution for content. Now it's just got to be about making it easy enough for everyone to create that content and get it out there. That's what we're trying to solve. And so I encourage anyone who is part of a sales organization, even a marketing organization, you don't have to be sales, get your story out there. It'll help you on a personal level, for sure, but it'll also lead to revenue results.
And it's so interesting, like you said, 5 to 10% of your revenue coming in from folks that you're deploying video against, or you're just kind of creating content and they're coming in, and there's this like ecosystem, and there's all these if you look at like a I think about it as a solar system, and at the cortex, or the center of this solar system is you, or your brand, or whatever it is. I call it the avatar. Okay. And you have these rings around that. And each ring could be, one ring is Facebook, one ring is LinkedIn, one ring is, whatever. The very, very outer ring is like, hand-to-hand, handshakes at conferences and things like that. But like, how do you penetrate those rings and just have people understand what your message is, what your character is, just so that they see it? And those people on that ring might be friends via Facebook, or 100%. Folks that you went to law school with and LinkedIn, and they're just kind of noticing this. They go ahead and they talk to their people, and their organic growth is it's massive. I've seen some of the video that you've put out. It's pretty awesome just to see, and I feel like I know you just by watching some of the video you're putting out. Your son is in the video. It's truly authentic.
Only one. I can't get my 7-year-old to be in any of them.
Yeah. So now you're touching on a subject that I also like to understand more. It's not easy to do this. Like right now we're setting up, we had to prepare some comments, make sure the lighting is okay, or audio. There's some degree of challenge in kind of creating this thing, for people who aren't good in front of a camera? Like, is that going to be friction? Is that going to be a showstopper? You're mentioning kind of some of these like executive type folks that are coming down who are very familiar in front of a camera. But what about the layman? Like, what's hard for you about being in front of a camera, and what have you done to kind of get through that?
Well, I mean, it's I like talking. I enjoy conversations. No, I mean, truly, like I really enjoy having conversations like this. Like, this is my favorite type of thing, which is having like just interactive discussions, answering questions. Also, I love being on the other side of this, to be honest with you. I love asking the questions. But it shouldn't feel that onerous, right? Like, there's a lot of ways to do this. I mean, if you're not comfortable, just try to start with recording some video. You don't have to be truly live. I mean, live can be a bigger barrier for folks. That's fine. Don't start there. There's ways to kind of create some short form video, get a feel for it, and then push it out. But I don't know, it's got to be, I think it's generally harder to just talk, to a camera without anyone on the other side. Like, this for me is much more natural, right? It's two people that have similar interests, like to talk. We're friends now. Like, this is a natural way to have a conversation. Together, we're sharing thoughts. I mean, you're asking more questions than I am for this particular one, but easily the next time we could flip that, and that'd be really fun.
Yep. Totally agree with that. And I'd love to just, when I talk to you, and Socialive is located in El Segundo.
That's right.
Well, currently it's in a multitude of homes, probably. Yeah. So, not a ton. When I think of SoCal, I like to think of SoCal as the Silicon Beach and all these different things. Tech scene. You've kind of seen a couple different environments. You've been involved in the SF market, the New York market, LA market. From a market perspective, you're hiring folks from your team, but Travis is driving this experience right now, and he was just telling me that he graduated from USC. So you're pulling in talent from local universities in LA. What's your take on generally the ecosystem that you're looking at from a tech perspective, and how does that play into your thoughts about encouraging and developing talent?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I've really kind of put together some thoughts around the LA market over the last 5 years. I've been here almost 5 years now. So I started the company in New York City, moved out here about 5 years ago. And then the company actually obviously pivoted into Socialive during that time. So one of the reasons I moved to LA in the first place, what I really liked about LA, which has proven to be true, is it's a very entrepreneurial environment. Not taking anything away from kind of venture capitalists per se, but San Francisco and New York are much more investor-driven markets first, entrepreneurs second, right? So you've seen it over the last three incarnations, the three stages of Silicon Valley. We're now kind of coming off the third one, right? It is a market that can be very frothy and kind of very driven by raising lots of money. In fact, if you go to San Francisco, people will immediately ask you who your investors are, not necessarily what your platform is or does, or even how you generate revenue, right? It's a different mindset. I know that's not across the board, but that's been my experience, and I feel like it's really kind of gone down that path. New York is interesting because it's not quite that way, but it still has a very traditional kind of finance-driven element there. LA, Los Angeles, it's a much more entrepreneurial environment. It hasn't had the number of wins, big kind of like billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar plus wins that San Francisco and New York have. As a result, it doesn't have that ecosystem of kind of investor-driven marketplace. Like the venture capitalists, while they're building here, it's a bit smaller. Even like angel investors, it's kind of a smaller network of angel investors. Growth equity PE actually is much stronger here because there's a lot of like small, medium-sized family businesses and a lot of capital going into them. But so it's very more entrepreneurial. On the flip side, I think that which I love as an entrepreneur who hasn't taken any institutional capital, we've never raised any venture. We are investor backed all by high net worth individuals, but we're a very like product revenue driven organization. And so I think it's an entrepreneurial spirit that we like here. That's why, and very collaborative too. Entrepreneurs are awesome in LA. Like everyone will help each other in a way that I did not see always in New York. And I don't think to be the case in San Francisco. Now, on the flip side, talent's challenging here. I'll be honest with you. I think, and for the same reason, because you haven't had as many kind of really successful, deep technology startups. The talent pool across technology, sales, and marketing is also not as deep. So you know, it is hard to find folks who've been through 1, 2, or 3 startups that have either exited and or kind of gone to different stages. And so, you know, you have to assemble your team a little bit differently. So I have found that to be a challenge here, to be honest.
And I love the LA context, because we're both, you know, I'm in Orange County, you're in LA right now. I'd love to talk a little bit about that. But first, institutional capital, when you say that, that's managed funds, like when you're talking about banks and you're talking about venture capital, where somehow it's professionally managed. And what is the advantage of going in that direction? Not from their perspective, because they're taking on some risk. But what is the advantage from going in that direction for like a Socialive, and what is the advantage from going into like a high net worth investor or a series of investors, friends, family, whatever that looks like? What has that helped you do, and what has that kind of slowed you? How's it slowed you down?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. Look, I think in our case, we've been very fortunate to be able to be investor backed, but at the same time to not have in our case, venture capital in our business, for a few reasons. But then I'll talk about where I think the benefits are. For us, it's been better because, look, we pivoted the business multiple times to get to where we are today. Socialive would not exist, at least in its current form, if we had taken institutional capital. This business would have been shut down a long time ago, because it took us time to figure it out. By being investor backed but having less capital, it made us become more disciplined about the business. Yeah, we had to be really rigorous. We had to really know we had a product and a market fit. And we had to pivot earlier sometimes, because you can't keep going on something that's not going to scale if you don't have lots of capital in your business, right? So I think it created a discipline. Now, on the flip side, when your business is starting to scale, not having as much firepower as you would want in the kitty, you know, that can hold you back. I mean, we're in a pretty good place because we're already a profitable organization. So we're actually, you know, profitable on a P&L perspective. But at the same time, we also have a decent amount of capital on the balance sheet. So we're able to make incremental hires. Probably, you know, not the number we would if we were institutionally backed, but enough to kind of, I think, continue to build the business at the right scale and level that we are right now. Look, my feeling on institutional capital, and first of all, the reality is it's going to be different during this crisis. Like, it's going to be hard to get institutional capital right now for a whole slew of businesses. Now, on the flip side, if you are a business that is counter cyclical to what we're about to experience, there's actually probably a lot of both capital and M&A activity available for you. But if you are not that, it's going to be real tough to get institutional capital. My feeling is too many startups take on what is pretty expensive institutional capital too early. So I think it really, they don't even realize it, but a lot of times what it's doing is it's actually pinning in the business. It's reducing options. It's not increasing options. It's actually reducing options out of the gate, because you're creating preferences in terms of the shareholders. You're probably going to need to take on more capital, because at the end of the day, venture capital is looking at, you know, $2 billion or bust, right? Like, at the end of the day, like a $300 million, $400 million value business, like, you know, for most cases. But that's a great outcome for a lot of entrepreneurs. Even a $50 or $100 million is a great outcome for a lot of entrepreneurs. So I always urge entrepreneurs to be very thoughtful on the capital they take, because having optionality in the business, both in terms of how you build it, but also outcomes, I can't tell you how important that is for you along the way. You're committing probably minimum 5, more realistically, in my case, 9 to 10 years of your life already to this. It's huge, right? So you got to make sure that you're thinking about it from an ROI perspective too.
And I mean, it sounds like when you're talking about, you know, this entire venture capital, institutional capital idea, it's almost like it's a microcosm of what taking a business to IPO is. You're just losing a ton of flexibility in that process. When it comes to, so how do you locate money? You know, in you know, maybe in LA it's easy, it's hard. I don't know what it's like up there, so to speak. Like, what does that process look like? You know, from an entrepreneur in your market in LA, like, what does that process look like? How do you go and do that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I want to be clear too, that I don't think there are plenty of businesses where taking venture or institutional capital is a great move. Certain companies need that kind of capital, that kind of firepower. I just think less need it than actually take it is the reality. You know, finding capital is always hard. And it's obviously really hard if you're building kind of investor by investor. In my case, I was a bit fortunate just given my network. I didn't start this business when I was 22. I started it when I was 32, I think, or 33, right? So I had already gone to law school, had worked at McKinsey, had built a network of these folks who, had firepower to put into high beta, high risk investments like Socialive. But the thing is, your network is key. Like at the end of the day, you got to build a network. And what you'll find is if you can get one or two investors interested, angel investors, they come in packs. There's one angel is never by himself. If one investor's in, they usually have 5 to 10 friends who are also looking to deploy capital in these types of things. And that's how it's worked for me. I mean, I've had essentially like a hub and spoke model where I've had, different individuals that have gotten involved, and they had like 5 or 6 or 10 folks that got involved. So it's been really interesting of having like kind of those key people that have then brought their network in. And that's how we've been able to build our business. So you got to think about those relationships.
I like how you talked about the networking. It's just the fact that you've had the work experience. You weren't trying to come out of your BA trying to start up a multi-million-dollar business. So I think focusing on the network and reminding folks to focus on that is so high value. What keeps you up at night in terms of? I mean, there's probably a ton of things that do, but like, what is keeping you up at night from a day to day?
From a business perspective?
From a business, from a business perspective,
yeah. Great question. So, I mean, weirdly, this is the most exciting part of the journey. Like, it's taken so long to get to this point, and it took a pandemic to accelerate it even more. And it's weird to kind of be, on the one hand, it's just like the most strange, kind of really horrible time. On the other side, like for the business, it's actually like really invigorating every morning, because every morning I wake up to a whole slew of really new, interesting discussions and emails from Fortune level customers and other folks that, are interested to partner with us, which is what I've always dreamed we would be at. The thing that keeps me up at night is, just really being able to quickly hire the resources to be able to support the growth that we're seeing. The growth it's pretty, for us, pretty astronomical. It's really about getting the talent in here. I think in this environment, things are moving so fast. So making sure that team members get onboarded appropriately when things are accelerating so fast. I mean, my days are right now, 12 hours, basically 8 to 6, so 10 hours where I'm back to back usually, not engaging with the team in the way I'm used to engaging. And then oftentimes, having to power up after the kids go to sleep. So just making sure that we don't lose connection with the core team in terms of the day-to-day, and making sure that new hires get onboarded and kind of can kind of get fit into the system in a way that really allows them to be the superstars that they can be.
And I mean, it sounds like just the level of opportunity that you're coming across right now is just it's good to see. I'm thinking about this almost from a philosophical perspective. I think a lot of people are going through really hard times. 1 in 3 Americans are either losing their jobs or they're going on furlough, or somehow their finances are being impacted. Right. That's massive. Right. But I think folks don't focus enough on the opportunity. There's always opportunity for something, whether it be buying low in the market, whether it be getting to know your kids better. Yeah. I have friends that are furloughed or laid off, or frankly just aren't going to have a job, and they're at home from a day to day with their kids, kind of complaining a little bit about what the future holds for them. But they have this ability to snapshot in time to spend some time with their 5 and 6 year old son or daughter, and it's the same goes to business. How are you seizing this opportunity? Are you creating content? Are you upskilling? Are you thinking about your plans? Like, I think there's a positivity inflection, I think, that just doesn't happen very often. Yeah. And I think people just need to seize that a lot more. With that, you mentioned education a little earlier, and I'd love to talk to you about what you're passionate about before we end the call here in the next few minutes. How can this process, you're talking about video creation, you're talking about dealerships, you're talking about all these different kinds of retail space, you're talking about real estate, how they can start using video. What does that look like on an education front? Like, are we doing a good enough job at deploying skilling across education? are there opportunities there as well in the video world?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on education. My mother was a sixth grade public school teacher for 30 years. My passion has always been kind of education and how you use video and entertainment, but as to kind of make education more engaging and relevant. That's one of the reasons I joined Scholastic, back in 2006 or whenever it was, because I thought they had an interesting platform. But look, I think. Yeah, I don't want to make this political, but I do think our country has underinvested in education for way too long, along with a whole slew of other parts of infrastructure like healthcare and infrastructure itself. Look, we're seeing kind of the breakage in the American system right now. We're seeing kind of the imperial power starting to weaken, right? And the reality is, like, we just haven't invested in education. Like, we look at being a teacher as being, a low-level job. Its starting salaries are abysmally low, not respected in this country. Quite frankly, this country over respects talent, athletes, and celebrities, and billionaires and millionaires. And look, I'm building a business. Yes, we're trying to create value, so I get it from that side. But it's really sad when you think about it that, like, we care so much more about a superstar athlete or a billionaire tycoon than we do about the teachers who are on the front lines trying to educate our young ones. And I think the reality is we haven't invested enough in the profession. The schools themselves, being largely property tax driven, creates tons of disparities across the country. Jonathan Kozell's book, Separate and Unequal, still remains relevant, 20 years later. But, I think, and we're also under-equipped from a technology perspective. I mean, I've been pretty impressed with what my kids have been experiencing from a Zoom perspective in terms of their classes over the last few weeks. So it shows it's possible. And I think, virtual education is definitely real. But I think at the end of the day, I do think education is still one of those things that in person is the key. And then video and other types of sources augment. But we're not really there yet in terms of embracing technology in the learning environment. That's become hugely clear over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, and my kids aren't old enough to be bringing home any type of curriculum, but I have some educators in the family. My wife comes from a family of educators, and it's funny just kind of seeing them. My wife's mom will send a video of her videoing like her iPad, and there'll be like the sound off on the iPad, but some video of something happened, and she's narrating the video, and it's like they're cultivating this relationship with their grandmas. My mom is certainly, we're doing FaceTime and all those different things, and we got a tripod, so we have the tripod like on the counter facing the bath, so it's bath time with Vovo, cool. Which is who's my mom, and this whole thing is going. And I'm always thinking about what that gap looks like for education and how we could address that gap with technology. It's just such a massive discussion. So the last question here, if you had, and I typically end the podcast sessions with these types of questions. If you had 7 days to tackle any challenge with unlimited resources, what would that be?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so 7 days, unlimited resources.
Unlimited resources. Time resourcing is not unlimited.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I mean, my wife and I, we have a lot of areas kind of we're passionate about. For me, I continue to kind of be passionate about learning as a space and how to kind of deliver, higher level, better education to kids in need, whether it be in the United States, but also in impoverished nations around the world. So 7 days is not a whole lot of time, but I would at least start the process. First, put it this way, if I had, my family was set from a resources perspective, and then we had, we could go all in with resources on one particular social endeavor, I would probably commit myself to education, particularly for, how do we deliver the resources, and kind of working with folks like the Gates Foundation to kind of really help equalize the system for kids in, poor urban and rural areas in the United States. And then secondarily, I would say, sub-Saharan Africa, as well as other kind of regions around the world. Because, I mean, I go back to my time in Zimbabwe. I met some of the most exceptional, bright, inspiring young children there between the ages of 10 and 14 that, if given the chances that I've had in my life, would be doing far more than what I'm doing with Socialive. That's how unbelievable these kids were. So I'm just purely fortunate to be in the body that I'm in, and at the point that I'm at. And we just got to change that as humans. Like, that's just not fair. And I mean, there's the making sure our Earth doesn't explode as well. But for me, on a very human level, like, I just think kids need a chance, man.
Yeah, that's really well said, David. And hey, you know what? You're just a great person and definitely a leader. There's so much to unpack with you. I know you have an immensely busy schedule, especially right now. And I just really appreciate all the help and learnings that you've kind of cultivated through me and have taught me. And the team's been getting on calls and helping me kind of create this content and kind of release and deploy some of the stuff that we've been doing. And I've been doing a ton of stuff on COVID-19 technology that Microsoft is releasing and things that folks are focusing on. And we've been having a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyed this discussion.
I loved it, man. No, it's great to be getting to know you. Thanks for being customer number one at Microsoft. And it's awesome to have you as a champion and partner. Excited to see what we can do together.
Yeah, let's get you customer number 2 through 30 or 40. Let's do that.
Sounds good.
All right, David.
I'm not
Thanks a lot.
All right, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.